I'm Julie Smith, 28 years old. On the long-awaited day of my wedding, I was filled with a mix of nervousness and excitement. I had spent so much time preparing for this moment, convinced that my partner, Robert, and I were about to begin a happy future together. I truly believed that days full of joy with the one I loved were just around the corner. When I arrived at the venue, the atmosphere was brimming with celebration. But to my shock, my sister Sarah was there, completely drunk. "Sarah, are you okay?" When I called out to her, she staggered unsteadily toward Robert. I couldn't understand what was happening and could only watch. Sarah leaned in close to Robert and joked,
Hey, you didn't forget that I'm the star of the show today, did you?
The guests around us were clearly taken aback by her strange behavior. Robert gave a troubled smile, but his eyes seemed to betray a hint of unease he couldn't hide. Robert gently tried to calm Sarah down, but she refused to listen and clung to him even tighter.
Julie, she's had a bit too much to drink. Let me take her aside and help her calm down.
"All right. Sarah, are you okay?"
Are you trying to say I'm in the way?
They exchanged jokes, acting as if they were in their own little world. As I watched nervously, Sarah suddenly pulled Robert close, and to everyone's shock, she kissed him.
This means your engagement is off.
Her loud voice echoed through the venue.
What?
"Sarah, what are you doing?" Robert, looking flustered, tried to say something, but no words came out. The entire venue froze as the guests stood there, bewildered by the bizarre scene. As I stood there with a tearful face, Robert said,
It's not. This is just.
he tried to explain, but Sarah laughed and said,
Did you really think you could hide it?
At that moment, an unbearable wave of anger and sadness consumed me. "Sarah, stop it right now." My voice trembled as I spoke, but Sarah coldly replied without a hint of remorse.
I'm sorry, Julie, but this is the reality.
Her words pierced my chest like a knife, and I felt my vision go blank. Still, I knew I couldn't cry in front of the guests, so I desperately tried to maintain my composure. But the anger and sadness boiling inside me were impossible to suppress. The truth is, I already knew about Sarah and Robert's secret relationship. But I had stayed silent, hoping to protect the bond and trust between us as sisters. I wanted to believe, just for today, that I could have a happy day. "Excuse me, everyone. I'm truly sorry for the inconvenience." I apologized to the guests at the venue. But at that moment, I felt something snap inside me. I decided I wouldn't let Sarah and Robert drag me down any further. I had endured enough, but today, here and now, I resolved to put an end to it. Sarah was restrained by some family members and forcibly escorted out of the venue. Even as she was being removed, Sarah's drunken protests echoed loudly, causing everyone to frown in disapproval. The venue fell into a heavy silence, and an awkward atmosphere hung in the air. A few minutes later, Robert returned to the venue, and the guests gasped. Robert's face was wrapped in white bandages, and one side of his cheek was grotesquely swollen.
What on earth happened?
One of the guests whispered, and others watched him curiously. Robert, wincing in pain, tried to greet the guests as he walked, but his appearance was so ridiculous that it filled the room with an uneasy tension. Here's what had happened behind the scenes. Seeing Robert and Sarah acting overly familiar, some of my relatives lost their temper.
I can't believe Sarah ruined Julie's wedding like this.
This is unforgivable.
My uncle and a few cousins decided to confront Robert. Robert panicked and tried to escape, but a drunken Sarah clung to him, blocking his way.
Let go, Sarah.
Robert is mine.
As Robert struggled to shake Sarah off, her incoherent shouting only fueled the anger of those around them. In the chaos, Robert found himself surrounded by my furious relatives, leading to a scuffle.
How could you hurt both sisters like this? What's your deal?
My relatives hurled their anger at him, and as one tried to give him a light slap, Robert lost his balance and stumbled, hitting his face against a table.
Please, let's get him treated immediately.
The venue staff, concerned by the scene, provided first aid, wrapping his face with layers of bandages. As a result, Robert returned to the ceremony looking utterly absurd, his face comically covered. When Robert reappeared in front of the guests, his pitiful state drew no sympathy. Instead, everyone could only sigh at the spectacle. Once the venue fell silent again, I quietly stood up, looked around the room, and began to speak. Everyone, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. The entire venue turned its attention to my voice. Robert, his face wrapped in bandages and filled with pain, stared at me. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself and continued. Originally, today was supposed to be the day you celebrated my wedding with Robert. However, there is something I must share with all of you. Robert's face tensed, and he began to say something, but I cut him off and spoke firmly. It's about the relationship between Robert and my sister, Sarah. The room erupted in murmurs as I said this. Sarah had returned to the venue. As the guests looked at Robert and Sarah in shock, Sarah stood next to Robert with a faint smirk, showing no signs of regret. Her expression stirred a deep anger within me, but I stayed calm and turned to face them. Sarah, how could you do this to me? When I asked her, Sarah shrugged and replied as if it were nothing.
Well, Julie, I'm sorry, but I've been in love with Robert. From the first time we talked, I knew I was the one meant for him.
The room buzzed with disbelief. My family and friends looked at her with expressions of shock and anger. Robert stood frozen, looking helpless and unsure of what to say.
And you know, Julie, that's just like you, isn't it? You believe everything so easily, never questioning anyone. It's so childish, and honestly, I've been fed up with you for a long time.
Sarah laughed as she spoke, looking down on me. Her attitude only intensified my anger, but I stared back at her, maintaining my composure. Fed up? Do you really think that justifies betraying me and sneaking around with Robert behind my back?
Justify? Not really. It's just that someone as clueless as you needed to be taught a lesson like this.
Sarah smirked mockingly at me, while Robert stood there silently, merely watching her behavior. I felt as though my heart was about to break, but I responded firmly. Do you have any sense of responsibility as a sister? To go after my partner, Robert, out of jealousy or insecurity and then stand here so shamelessly? You should be ashamed of yourself. Sarah looked momentarily surprised, but quickly replaced her expression with a cold sneer.
Ashamed? Shouldn't you be the one ashamed? Do you have any idea how much I hated the thought of handing Robert over to someone like you? I'm saying this because I'm confident I'm the one who's better for him.
Every time Robert tried to speak, Sarah interrupted him, continuing to provoke me. The guests' gazes grew colder, their disdain for the two of them becoming more apparent. Taking a deep breath, I addressed the room again. Everyone, I deeply apologize for the behavior of Sarah and Robert. With that, I reached into my bag, pulled out several photos, and held them up for everyone to see. The pictures showed Robert and Sarah holding hands and smiling at each other affectionately. Each image captured them meeting secretly, Just the two of them. What is the meaning of this, Robert? Robert's face turned pale, and his distress was clear in his expression. He opened his mouth to explain, but his voice trembled.
It's not what it looks like. Sarah just.
Before he could finish, Sarah smirked and cut in.
Sorry, Julie, but this is the reality. I truly love Robert, and he loves me more than he loves you.
Her callous words caused a wave of murmurs to ripple through the room. I could feel the icy stares of my friends and family directed at the two of them. I calmly fixed my gaze on Sarah and Robert. Robert, no matter what excuses you come up with, they don't matter to me anymore. The fact that you've been in this kind of relationship with Sarah while we were engaged shows just how despicable and dishonest you are. Robert blushed and averted his gaze, but as the crowd's stares grew colder, he attempted to justify himself again.
Julie, it's not like that. Please believe me. Sarah and I
don't want to hear any more excuses. I cut him off coldly and addressed the room again. Everyone, I will no longer entertain their lies. I hereby officially end my engagement to Robert. And I want to share just how deeply I've been hurt by these two. Robert's face turned ashen, and Sarah, finally realizing the gravity of the situation, began to look troubled. Sarah, don't ever show your face to me again. And Robert, the same goes for you. Stay out of my life from now on. The guests were stunned by my resolute attitude, and a hush fell over the room. Robert and Sarah stood frozen as everyone directed cold, disapproving stares at them. When I pulled out more photos from my bag and displayed them, the evidence was undeniable. Each one showed proof of their secret meetings, all carefully hidden from me. Robert's distress deepened, and he tried desperately to plead with me.
Julie, please wait. I can explain. Sarah was.
Are you still trying to make excuses? Everyone, listen to this man's true nature. The room buzzed again with murmurs of disbelief. Our relatives and friends exchanged glances and cast icy looks at the two of them. Robert, you've shown not a shred of integrity. You carried on a close relationship with Sarah behind my back and actually thought I'd never find out? Robert averted his gaze, staring at the ground in silence. The guests whispered among themselves, but no one paid attention to Robert's excuses. Instead, they looked at me with sympathy. Robert, Sarah, I am officially cutting ties with both of you here and now. And to everyone present, I want to declare my decision to move forward and start a new chapter in my life. Don't involve yourselves with me again. A chilling silence filled the venue as everyone was awestruck by my composure and resolve. Robert and Sarah stood there, frozen, unable to respond under the cold gazes of the guests. I glanced at them one last time, straightened my posture, and walked out of the venue. However, what happened after the ceremony had unexpected consequences. Several of Robert's coworkers had attended the wedding. The moment I exposed Robert and Sarah's betrayal and formally ended the engagement had been captured on video. The day after the ceremony, the video of the incident spread rapidly through Robert's workplace, becoming a hot topic among his colleagues and supervisors. Robert's dishonest behavior came to light, completely changing the atmosphere in the office. When Robert found out, he panicked and tried to contain the situation, but it was already too late. First, Robert's direct supervisor, Bill, summoned him to the conference room. As Robert entered, the stern expression on Bill's face made him tense up.
Robert, I need to ask you about what happened yesterday. Is what Julie said in front of everyone true?
Robert's face turned pale as he desperately tried to come up with an excuse.
Bill, it's all a misunderstanding. It's just a minor miscommunication.
Bill let out a deep sigh, fixing Robert with a piercing gaze.
A minor miscommunication. Julie exposed your relationship with Sarah in front of everyone. This is not a minor issue.
Unable to defend himself, Robert stammered and averted his eyes, avoiding Bill's glare.
Moreover, several of your co-workers attended your wedding. They clearly saw and heard the full extent of your unfaithful behavior. The story has now spread throughout the company.
Robert's face went ashen as he tried to explain himself, but Bill's stern gaze left him speechless. Meanwhile, his colleagues began to distance themselves from him one by one. Robert's reputation in the office plummeted, and it became clear even to him that he had lost the trust of those around him. Until now, Robert had thought of himself as a reliable and respected member of the team, but this incident completely shattered that image. Even when he tried to talk to coworkers in the break room, they made no effort to hide their disdain and kept their distance.
Hey, can I explain what really happened yesterday? The truth is,
But one coworker cut him off with an obviously exasperated expression.
Explain what? We saw and heard everything in that video. The fact that you were involved with your partner's sister? Honestly, it's disgusting. I used to think you were a decent guy, but now I'm embarrassed for you.
Unable to respond to his coworker's harsh words, Robert could only lower his head in silence. A few days after the wedding, while Robert was struggling at work, another bombshell exploded. This time, it was Sarah's carefully curated celebrity influencer image on social media that came crashing down in spectacular fashion. With the help of my best friend, Nancy, I had live-streamed the scene from the wedding where I exposed Robert and Sarah's betrayal. I wanted the world to see the moment when Sarah's glamorous mask was ripped away. On the day of the wedding, Nancy held her phone, stationed discreetly in the corner of the venue, and recorded everything per my instructions. She captured the moments where I confronted Robert and Sarah, as well as the decisive moment when I showed the damning photos of their betrayal, streaming it all in real time. That footage began to spread gradually but steadily. On social media, hashtags like #CelebritySisterBetrayal and #WorstWeddingEver began to trend, getting reposted and quickly reaching thousands, then tens of thousands of people. That same day, while relaxing at home, Sarah noticed the flood of notifications on her phone. It didn't take her long to understand what was happening.
What is this? Wait, a video of me?
Panic-stricken, Sarah opened the video and watched herself drunkenly clinging to Robert and causing a scene at the wedding. Her face turned pale as she stared in speechless horror. Her followers bombarded her posts with harsh comments, and her screen filled with scathing criticism.
You've been bragging about your celebrity. What is this? That's disgusting.
Ruining your sister's wedding? That's just gross.
What an embarrassing woman.
Sarah, desperate, tried to respond to the comments, but the critical messages kept pouring in, leaving her increasingly flustered.
Wait, this is all a misunderstanding.
She desperately tried to type out comments, but the flood of responses from her followers showed no signs of slowing down. The comment section quickly filled with likes, burying her excuses deeper and deeper. Meanwhile, I sat with Nancy, watching the ripple effects spread across social media on our phones. Nancy struggled to hold back her laughter as she watched Sarah's meltdown.
Julie, this is absolutely priceless. She always bragged to her followers about being a celeb, and now she's blowing up in the worst way.
I shrugged, recalling Sarah's smug posts and comments from before, and sighed with a faint smile. Well, I guess it's just karma catching up with her. Her followers needed to see the reality for what it is.
Serves her right. Betrayal like that from a sister and partner? Most people wouldn't have been able to handle it. Julie, you've been so strong through all of this.
Nancy's encouragement gave me a small sense of relief. The anger over their betrayal still simmered inside me, but watching the small revenge play out on social media brought me a bit of satisfaction. Meanwhile, Sarah, unable to stop the barrage of criticism, frantically posted comment after comment to explain herself.
This is all a misunderstanding. My sister got it wrong. We're just close friends. Please believe me.
But the responses to her comments were cold.
Sarah, we can all see your expressions in that video. This isn't a misunderstanding, is it? Or Julie, I can't believe you'd do something like this.
Sarah's desperate attempts to explain were futile, and instead, her visible distress only added to the entertainment value, fueling the video's spread. Her follower count plummeted, replaced by a wave of anti-fans and hashtags like #WorstSisterEver. This social media storm also began to affect Robert. At his workplace, the viral video was shared among his coworkers, and gossip spread like wildfire. Robert, sitting in his office with his phone clutched tightly, stared in shock at the footage circulating online. His name had been tagged, and he was now branded as #WorstPartner across social platforms.
How did it come to this?
Panicking, Robert tried everything to stop the video's spread, posting comments and sending takedown requests, but it was far too late. The video continued to gain traction, and his desperate actions had no effect. Aware of the chaos unfolding, I quietly observed the social media frenzy from a distance, choosing to remain a passive spectator.
Julie, the reaction has been incredible. That live stream has already been viewed tens of thousands of times.
Nancy's eyes sparkled as she looked at her screen, while I quietly pumped my fist in triumph. This is their reckoning. They trampled all over me, thinking they could get away with it. Now they're paying the price. I murmured to myself and felt a small sense of relief. A few days later, unable to withstand the backlash on social media, Sarah finally posted on her account.
To everyone, I deeply regret my past actions. I sincerely apologize for the recent series of events.
However, her post was met only with cold comments, and Sarah's apology was believed by no one, completely exposing her facade as nothing more than a pretense. Her followers completely saw through Sarah's true nature, and no one trusted her posts anymore. A few days later, her once glamorous celebrity account was quietly shut down, and her mask was entirely stripped away. Another few days later, Robert was summoned by Bill, who started the conversation with a serious tone.
You're aware that you've lost credibility within the company due to this incident, aren't you? And it's not just that. The video has started affecting the company's reputation as well.
Bill, please, just give me some time. I promise to act with integrity from now on.
However, the company has decided that it's no longer feasible to keep you on.
Robert was stunned into silence, desperately trying to plead his case.
Please wait. Bill, I'm begging you. I'll do better. Just give me another chance.
Bill calmly shook his head and continued.
Do you realize how much trust you've lost among your colleagues? They're avoiding you, and the higher ups are questioning your actions. The issue isn't just your behavior as an employee. It's the negative impact your actions have had on the company's image.
A cold wave of despair swept over Robert. No matter how much he tried to justify himself, the trust he had lost was beyond repair. After this, Robert became completely isolated at work. Conversations with coworkers that had once been casual were now met with rejection, and no matter what he said, he was greeted only with cold stares. Having lost the trust of both his supervisors and colleagues, Robert couldn't help but feel increasingly out of place. Eventually, he decided to resign on his own. However, I had no intention of forgetting how my happiness and my future were destroyed. The betrayal by Robert and Sarah ruined my wedding and shattered the dream of a happy future I had envisioned. I was determined to make them pay for what they had done. First, I decided to demand reimbursement from Robert for all the wedding expenses. From the countless planning meetings to the preparation costs, as well as the compensation for the guests whose time was wasted and the venue cancellation fees. The total amount was staggering. I had poured all the money I had painstakingly saved into this wedding, and I couldn't accept anything less than full reimbursement from Robert. Although I wanted to confront him directly, I decided to leave everything in the hands of a lawyer. In addition, I resolved to file for damages against Robert and Sarah for breaking off the engagement due to their affair. This was a fair consequence for the betrayal they had committed. Without hesitation, I reached out to a highly reputed lawyer in the area. I'd like to discuss filing for damages due to the broken engagement and seeking reimbursement for the wedding expenses. I explained, determined to pursue justice.
Breaking off the engagement under these circumstances is a legitimate reason. If you have evidence, filing for damages is definitely possible.
The lawyer assured me with a nod. Please help me make this happen.
Of course. I'll gladly take your case.
The lawyer responded warmly. It was decided that a certified letter demanding damages for the broken engagement and reimbursement for the wedding expenses would be sent to the address where Robert and Sarah were living together. A few days later, it seemed the certified letter had arrived, notifying them of the claims. Although I didn't see their reactions firsthand, I could easily imagine Robert's shock upon reading the notification. Having ruined the wedding and humiliated me, there was no way they could escape responsibility. Both Robert and Sarah were currently unemployed. Robert lost all trust at his workplace, leaving him without a place there and forcing him to resign voluntarily. Sarah, who had been earning a modest income through social media, saw her follower count plummet amid the backlash, leading to the loss of her sponsorship deals. Not long after, they showed up at my doorstep. Through the intercom, I could hear Robert and Sarah's voices.
Julie, please listen to me for a minute.
Julie, come on. What are we supposed to do after something like this?
I sighed internally, but had no intention of letting them into my home. After everything they had done, asking for my forgiveness now was absurd. What do you want? I asked coldly through the intercom. Robert's voice was filled with desperation.
Julie, about the wedding expenses and the damages. Can you give us a little more time? We really can't afford to pay right now.
That's your problem, not mine. It has nothing to do with me. I replied in a detached tone. Robert tried to say more, but Sarah interrupted him.
Look, Julie, can't you try to understand? We have our own lives to deal with. We can't afford to pay you damages.
I couldn't help but laugh at Sarah's audacity. To think she could say something like that so shamelessly. How self-centered can she be? I was completely exasperated. Sarah, have you ever cared about my life? This is the result of your selfish actions, and you're getting exactly what you deserve. Robert interrupted hastily.
Julie, I'm truly sorry. I regret everything. Please, just give us a little more time.
I sighed and cut him off coldly. Regret? If regret could fix this, I wouldn't be this hurt. Even now, you clearly don't understand how deeply your actions have wounded me. Sarah, unable to hide her frustration, yelled accusingly.
Julie, Don't you think you're going too far? We're struggling to make ends meet. And now you're demanding damages too? That's just cruel.
Her selfish words finally made my emotions overflow. Are you seriously saying this now? You stole my partner, Robert, and humiliated me at my own wedding. You need to pay for the wedding expenses and damages as outlined in that certified letter. If you don't comply, I won't hesitate to take legal action. I spoke calmly, but my voice carried a faint anger and unshakable resolve. Robert weakly responded,
I see. I understand.
Sarah, wearing a sullen expression, remained silent. Realizing they couldn't break my determination, they walked away from the intercom without another word. After watching them leave, I took a deep breath in solitude. I'll never let them manipulate me again. I was determined not to relent until they paid what they owed. From then on, Robert and Sarah struggled under the weight of the damages and the massive wedding expenses. Both of them were unemployed and had completely lost their social credibility. In such a situation, their only option was to work tirelessly from morning until night. Robert, now far removed from his former office work, found a job stocking shelves during the night shift at a supermarket. The physically demanding labor of hauling heavy items left him utterly exhausted. Despite suffering from back pain, he was constantly pushed by his boss, his face flushed as he struggled to carry boxes. Sarah, unable to find a job due to the backlash from her social media scandal, ended up working long hours in a factory from morning until night. Her gloved hands became rough and chapped, and the factory supervisor frequently reprimanded her without mercy, gradually breaking down her once proud attitude. The two would return home late every night, utterly drained. Every night, they returned home exhausted, eating instant noodles for dinner while sighing and reminiscing about their former celebrity lifestyle. The stark contrast with their current reality nearly brought them to tears. Meanwhile, months passed, and I was thoroughly enjoying my new life. Though marriage didn't happen, I felt lighter and was living each day with a newfound sense of joy. Work was going well, and I felt fulfilled participating in a new projects that gave me a sense of purpose. My days were productive, and I could feel myself growing. On weekends, I often spent time with my best friend, Nancy, exploring cafes or traveling.
Julie, you're absolutely glowing these days.
Really? Thank you. I'm having so much fun right now. Free from the constraints of marriage, I was relishing my independent and carefree life. My heart was no longer tied to the past. I found the greatest happiness in focusing on myself and pursuing the things I loved.